Well, there we go. Looks like it's gone live, Jeremy. All the things. By the way, as you prep and you get ready, let me just give you an idea here of how many things are charging. Right, like watch has to charge, phone has to charge, computer has to charge, Nintendo Switch. I probably should put it into the AC outlet, but I have not. For whatever stubborn reason, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just do it through USB. And you know what? That is my mic is further away. That is not really moving the needle at all. I think that was a really bad call. But anyway, so while Jeremy prepares, hey, let me give you guys a quick update. So we're at it again. We did this last night, Jeremy, for how long? It's like two,
Two
almost 3
solid
hours.
hours. Yeah, it was a great time.
Guys, and we understand, like, that is way too long, right, for anybody to watch any given thing. That's like literally a movie without like all the nice little special effects. So let's just give you an idea of what's going to be on the agenda today. So specifically, it's going to be about Disney's new Little Mermaid, because apparently that is a big issue. So we're going to get into that a little bit, alongside some actual facts that we want to share with you of why illegal immigrants actually help to the U.S. economy. And not stating that that's the right thing to do, but what we are stating is there are some reasons perhaps why we are not tackling the issue like we should. And we just want to dissect that a little bit and hear your thoughts. So as always, look, we're not opposed. We want to hear your views. There's a comment section. Just so you know how this goes. When we do see it, we do address it. We put it up and post it. And so we love it. It's nice when people agree with you, sure, but we also don't mind it when people do disagree. So, and yes, actually, you do know her, because hey, we got the trainer actually in LA on the S10s. That was actually really cool. And good shout out on that article, by the way, because I could have easily have passed that up and not caught it. All right, Jeremy. So are you good?
I'm good, man.
Okay, so Jeremy, so
What's up,
just walk me
Abigail?
through right now specifically. Nice little shout out. So walk me through what's going on. Why is this? Before we even go with why it's a controversy to begin with. Okay, so what's the deal? Give us a scoop with Disney.
So the deal is, and I think there's a long history here that you could go into just to provide the context, but really the deal is Disney is remaking all these great movies. We've seen Aladdin remake came out earlier. The Lion King remake is the end of this month. I can't wait. I'm so excited for that.
That should be really good.
Little Mermaid remake was announced this week, and the casting for this week, the announcement was that Haley Halle Bailey. I'm always going to get Halle Berry in there. Just I can't not. She's casted for the role of Ariel in Little Mermaid, and the uproar from everyone who doesn't agree with having a black Little Mermaid or an African American actress playing Little Mermaid
Mhm.
is alive and well. And my thoughts, my kind of question that comes from this is cultural appropriation, is it something that needs to extend to the silver screen? How much so? How long? There's a lot of, sort of lines that need to be defined here.
Okay.
And also, at this point in time, in 2019, is this that much of a bad thing? Is it okay for people to be upset about this? I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, and by the way, again, please, chat box, go at it. So this is what I find interesting. Look, okay, so I'm going to take it back for a little bit. It's like the newer Superman, right? So, like, I grew up with Christopher Reeves, really loved that version. And then the newer version when Man of Steel came out, and it made it relevant for our times, right? Which is really appropriate to do because look, times change, cultures adapt as well. So I think it's really important that you do go back and revisit. And look, I understand it's tough sometimes. Like you don't want to mess up an original. Like one of my favorite movies of all time, Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Do you need to go remake it? Like I would hope nobody would tackle that one for just many, many, many years to come. But at the same time, there's when you look at Disney in general, like it's such a good classic set of tales. And again, these things over time, technology changes, you can make them better and better. Like if you look at, and I know I'm hopping all over the place, let me keep my thoughts clear here. When you look at The Lion King, I'll start with that one first. It went from like, okay, cool, old animation, and now we have the technology that will allow it to almost seem like real life animals, right? So to add, it just makes it more relevant, easier to watch in this time. Back to the Superman one. I watched The Man of Steel. They brought up like the controversy of like having a godlike character, all so many things that fit in today's political and just the climate in general. And so it has to be revisited. One, I don't think it's ever safe to say, oh, if it's not broke, don't fix it. because over time things do get broken. I mean, you can barely even read the Bible sometimes to understand it because the language was just so different over time. So these things have to be remade. So when I look at it, I see being remade is totally cool, and why not change up some of the characters a little bit? So with the Little Mermaid in general, let me pause here for a minute. Why are people so upset over that to begin with?
I can't for the life of me understand why people would be that upset about it. Now, the one opinion that I've seen shared that I have to, personally, I can't, I can't really identify with this opinion because I wasn't a little girl growing up in the 90s. I was obviously a little boy growing up in the 90s. And Little Mermaid didn't mean that much to me. Lion King meant a whole lot to me. It's probably one of my favorite movies to watch as a kid. Did I get upset when Jonathan Taylor Thomas was replaced by Donald Glover? Absolutely not. Yes, that's not going to be visually on screen, but I think the opinion of some people who are really upset about this is they have this image of Ariel, the Little Mermaid, growing up, that this white lady with red hair, she's using a fork, like all these intricate details that they remember from their childhood, and they wanted to be able to recreate that as accurately as possible. So if you take racism out of it for a second, I think there is some points that can be made there that I tend to, I understand a little bit. Now, take that completely out of it and say that it doesn't need to be that way, and just because your vision isn't going to be the vision that Disney went with, too bad, right? Like Star Wars has taught us anything, it's that we're not going to get what we want from Disney. When you take that out of it, go enjoy the damn movie. Like how can you go to the movie and see it and just see, oh, that's a black girl the whole time? Are you really going to be that way about it? Because to be honest with you, that sounds a little racist, And so I do sympathize with some of that opinion, but it goes pretty quick for me just because, it's not what you want it to be. Great. Enjoy something else about it, or don't enjoy it and let somebody else enjoy it. Cinderella, I don't remember how many people were that upset about Cinderella being replaced by Brandy back in, 96 or whatever it was. When they did the remake of Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
But now that it's topical, and now that, and again, the reason I bring this whole thing into our discussion is cultural appropriation has been so heavily focused on, not just with African Americans, but also with women, just with, sort of rebooting everything so that it fits the needs of, and one discussion that I think should be had here is, how much good is it doing when you're drawing that much negative attention to it by forcing it?
So I guess there's like a few things that come up, right? So, again, let me stick with one of my originals, right? Like anytime I think of the Terminator, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? And look, Arnold's getting a bit older, clearly, and eventually, like he won't be with us. Some people say don't make any more of those movies. That's the whole situation. But the thing is, when I think of that character, I see Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? And so maybe for Ariel, when people think of that character, that cartoon character is what comes to mind. And I guess like it's one of those things where I can understand your childhood, just maybe your vision, the way you grew up, the way you saw it, like it changes that. And I can see where you look and go, oh man, it's just not the same. That I totally see. And I do want to be slow to say that many people may be racist about it. And the reason why I want to pull the pause for a second on that one is some people just have. As a matter of fact, I shouldn't say some. A lot of people have a issue with change in general. And so I think when they see that, they look and they say, oh, that's not the OG, that's not the original character. I just don't feel that that should be done. And then I would look at it as like, if this were, let's say, Mermaid 2 or whatnot, then I can see maybe where they'd want the same character. But this is a remake. Again, I look at a remake as to make it more modern, make it fit in cultural times. So I guess I'm on the fence on that one. I could see why some people may look at it and be like, okay, the character's completely changed. Why did they change it? Especially if they felt like they identified with the other one. I completely see that. And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with somebody, let's say, asking the question. And I want to pose this very carefully. However, at the same time, I'm like, so what? So what if she's black, brown, Asian, white, whatever, has red hair, blonde hair? Like, doesn't matter. She can have braids for all I care from the Caribbean. Like, none of that should matter whatsoever. The focus should be on the story and what it portrays, and perhaps when you do make it look like other type of cultures, then they can adapting to fit that. And so what I mean is like, if I'm just gonna be honest with you, like if I go to South Georgia and I'm like the only brown person somewhere, please believe, let me not put up a front. Of course, I look around and be like, yo, where's all the brown people at? I don't care where they're from. Give me an Asian dude, give me a Hispanic guy, give me another African. It does not matter. Like, where is the diversity? I'm gonna ask that. Just like if I were to walk in a place and it's full of, let's say, there's all black, men and women there, I do look and say, okay, yo, there's no like white people in here. There's no Asian people. I do look for those things, and I think the majority of us do. And so if we just take a step back for a moment and look at it, it's like, look, this is just a character that's coming to play. They're modernizing it. And if you read the reason behind why Disney wanted to go that way, they're like, look, she fit everything. She had like the spiritual view. She had a great singing voice. She had the, like the aura about her that really fit that character. And she best fit the character. And why not let it be? It doesn't have to be, a black and white or color situation. If she fits the character, why can't it just play out?
Well, and I think that's the big takeaway here is it's really a non-issue. It's an issue by people who create an issue from it. When we look back to when they remade Beauty and the Beast, they chose Emma Watson to fill the role of Belle.
Yeah.
Probably picture perfect if you look at the actual, just the movie posters.
Mm-hmm.
But when you looked at the actual movie, there was a lot of people who didn't really like that decision. They didn't think that she fits the mold of Belle. She couldn't sing, very well. She didn't have the same charisma, attitude, character, persona, and there was a lot of people complaining about that. So Disney took that, tried to go find a perfect Ariel, and I don't know anything about the young lady. I've never seen her in anything. I know she's sort of a new face, but there's always going to be somebody that complains anytime change is involved, and you're correct in that. I remember when people complained about Tom Holland being cast as the next Spider-Man,
yeah.
And I've got to be honest with you, Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man that I've ever seen. He plays Peter Parker exactly how I remember Peter Parker as a kid. I thought the same thing about Tobey Maguire, and now I see that there's always a way to improve. So change isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes there's a good element to it. Mm-hmm. But the one point that I think it really hammers it home, and this is again something I can't personally identify with. I can't really speak to it personally, but I've seen a lot of people represent it this way. For 60 years, Disney had these princesses that were white, female, this picture perfect. You could put all of them in a lineup, and you probably wouldn't be able to tell who was from which movie. And the Princess and the Frog was the first movie that Tiana came and was a person of color. And so for 60 years, we've had these girls living in America, watching these movies, growing up. I know that probably the most Disney-loving person that I can think of right now is an African American. She loves all Disney princesses, no matter what the race. She's not upset about it. So why should white people get upset now? Why should white girls who had that growing up get upset now? Now that the tables are kind of turned a little bit, and it's not that much of a change. Just go and watch the movie and enjoy it for what it is. It doesn't have to be serious.
Jerry, we're seeing this everywhere. I mean, okay, so you brought up like when you said Beauty and the Beast. I remember people complaining because like the dude's character, one of the guy's characters was gay in it, like undercover or whatnot. People complain about it. I'm like, oh, can people just get over it? The world is made of an assortment of people. Period. Yep. Like full stop. It's an assortment of people. So what does it matter? Let people play the characters. I mean, if I go watch, like sometimes I watch, let's say like you got some older style movies, right? Where let's say if you had a person like me, and an old, go past the Western era, right? I'd probably be up in the house on the field somewhere. Let's just keep it real, right? But then if I play, let's say like a major character that's not in the house in the field. Is that weird to some people? Some people may pause. And again, I want to draw the distinction. I don't personally see with anything wrong with people noticing it, right? Like it being an observation. I think that's totally human nature. And there's nothing wrong with somebody saying, oh, wait a minute. Okay, Errol's, a different complexion this time or whatever it may be. Like there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to just notice that as a human being. Where I do draw the line is when people get outraged by it. I'm like, look, the real focus should be on the story. Yeah. Not the character's makeup. This is where things get, overdrawn and gets crazy, right? I mean, we've seen this, like, my favorite is, like, kids that have the most innocence, right? Like, they, you have, like, this is kind of, like, off topic, but I'm going to make sure it fits. When Halloween comes around every year, somebody will dress up. Let's say you have like, specifically a white person that loves the African American culture, and let's say they wear afro, then people get upset about it, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, what's happening with the opposite here? If the person has good intent and they want to be a character and they put on afro, like, get over it, for crying out loud. Like, it's gone too far. I'm like, people need to settle down. So it does go both ways. It's just something I want to acknowledge. But in this particular case, I just think people are just losing their cookies all over nothing. It's just so overblown, and I'm like, what is wrong with us here in America? Like, what is wrong with America right now?
Well, and I think, I'm probably going to get heat from people who agree with me on a lot of things for saying this, but I think part of the reason that it's such a big deal for people on the other side that don't share those opinions is because when somebody like Disney makes that decision, it's represented by this mission behind it, this motivation of, we're trying to promote diversity, we're trying to promote this. The one thing that I think of is, and I just told you, we went and finally took the wife to go see Avengers Endgame this weekend. And
Fury, totally
there was the scene, and it was the second Avengers movie. And so this was the second time. In both movies, there was a deliberate attempt in one scene to highlight girl power, okay? No issue on my part with highlighting girl power. The minute you make that much effort to bring attention to it, the minute people say, hang on a second, this is deliberate, this is intentional, and there's a purpose behind it that I have to be mad about because there's somebody who disagrees with how I feel. You could have gone the entire movie highlighting girl power throughout the entire thing, not said anything about it, and I think you can still have that success story of, the female superheroes doing their part to save the world. It's not something that I would have thought about. Highlighting females in movie remakes like Ghostbusters, highlighting them in, I've got no issue with it. I've got nothing wrong with it. But where's the line? How far do you have to go to say that this is what we're trying to do? We're trying to put females in the spotlight. We're trying to put people of color in the spotlight without understanding the fact that you're embracing some of that discussion, which is then going to detract from the actual mission of treating everybody like they're equal.
But look what Abigail just wrote, and I agree with this. She's like, okay, so Disney whitewashed everything before and made the princess helpless to men. So true. They've changed the idea in the remakes with women power, so they are making it more accurate all around. Absolutely agreed. And she even asked a question, just a little follow up here to put.
That's a great point.
It is likely that if mermaids actually existed, they would be white redheads. Do you realize the sunburn they would have? Look, my sister-in-law would totally agree with that, by the way. I mean, these are all good points, right? It's like, look, if we're going to go through some, logical processes stuff here of why we try to justify these things, she brings up good points. And again, to show you the changes of times, right? Like, at that time, there were pretty much just, white princesses all around, especially in America anyway. And another point is, the princess will always helpless to men. And these things have changed. I mean, in the back, where's she at? There's Wonder Woman. I don't know if you see her by the mirror right there, right? Thank you, John Ledger from T-Mobile. He sent that. But anyway, so like, I think that's nice.
Name drop.
But he's a nice guy. So I think it's just, we've just gone like just through great lengths to have outrage. And at some point, it's just got to end. Like, again, the focus should be on the story. Diversity is great for everyone. Like a movie I haven't seen yet, and I totally regret. So definitely feel free to come at me. Like I didn't see Crazy Rich Asians or something like that. But anyway, so like that's a movie I want to see because from a culture standpoint, apparently it really hit and highlighted some things. Or Netflix, another one I still haven't seen yet. I haven't even started Stranger Things, but we'll go there later. And I mean the third season, you guys. Of course, I've seen the other two. But like on the Netflix original, When They See Us, right, which has definitely sparked like a lot of just people having a new understanding of how it feels to be like a black person in America these days, because sometimes people see us as a threat or to see like gangsters. There's all sorts of different things, and so again, I haven't seen it. That's on my watch list, which hopefully I'll do on a plane tomorrow. But the point is, people already have these perceptions. I know, Abigail. Don't give me too much grief. But like people already have these perceptions, and we just got to tear down those barriers. I mean, we're growing as a nation, and I know growth can be uncomfortable sometimes, but this is something we should totally celebrate and embrace and not get all up in arms about. But at the same time, on the flip side of the coin, I don't think there's people should still be allowed to, in a sense, again, kind of take that notice. Like, I understand you take that notice. I guess I draw the line when people, again, they just get upset about it. I just think we're losing our poo emoji.
Well, so here's a good example, and this is probably
Let's
the
hear
most indicative representative example I can think of.
Okay.
The new James Bond, Idris Elba. In the United Kingdom, I don't think there's that many people who are upset about this. I don't know for sure. I'm sure there's a faction of people out there.
Okay.
I don't think there's a large group of people in the United Kingdom who are mad about having a black James Bond. In the United States, holy poo emoji, as you would say. It is a completely different contrast.
So
Idris
why do you
Elba
think that
is one of the
Why do
best
you think that is,
actors.
though? Like, I'm very curious. Like, just your thoughts.
Yeah.
Is it just because that's like all the rage these days? Like, why is it? And I'm asking you because as somebody who has dual citizenship, right, and has experienced cultures outside the United States, like, why is it that we just continuously go there?
Yeah, it's a valid question. In Canada, though, I think that there's another faction of people who are upset about it because, it's very interesting to me. The outrage portion of it is really what spawns these long discussions. It's really what creates this mentality that we can be mad about anything we disagree with. And it really comes back to, 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, there was a change that happened in this country where that was made acceptable. And it was actually before that. It was during the campaign of 2016 where this was normalized and sort of become more of a, I'm going to be mad about things I couldn't be mad about when my president was black. That's my viewpoint of it. And then in Canada, right? So you asked about the dual citizenship in Canada. There's a prime minister who embraces this regularly, almost to a fault. He's so liberal. Sometimes it's embarrassing as somebody who identifies with that to say, like, you are trying too hard. You're working way too hard to demonstrate these values that you should be demonstrating naturally, and people should be seeing you demonstrate naturally. But the more you try, the more people push back on it because you're just making that attempt. Now, full disclosure, I come from a line of conservatives in Canada. My grandfather was a major player in the Conservative Party of Canada political system. So to me, I've seen both sides growing up closer than anyone. As somebody who came from that, but also identifies with more of the liberal side of Canada, I just want people to act the way that they should act, have no real need to defend the way that they're acting, so that when somebody comes at them and says, hey, well, why are you doing this? Instead of saying something like, well, it's 2019, or to quote Justin Trudeau, it's 2015 and there's no woman in the office. Like, yes, that's true, but that shouldn't be your reasoning. Your reasoning should be because this woman is the most qualified person for the job. And that's it. And I get the need to really highlight the inclusion and to highlight that, but that gives the other side a point to argue about. So using this Idris Elba James Bond analogy, when you say James Bond is now Idris Elba, he's a fantastic actor. I mean, one of the best actors that's around right now, in my opinion.
And by the way, I don't want to interrupt your flow
too
much, but something I want to point out here is you hit on a good point, which is whoever the person is, right? Male, female, black, white, Asian, whatever. You definitely want to get the best candidate or the best character to play, right? Which Disney, to the point, did that and explicitly stated why they chose her. On that flip side, this is where we have to make sure that we do our due diligence, that we have people in place or give the opportunities to find more people and encourage, for instance, so in computer programming, something I dabble in on the side a bit, a lot of women are kind of pushed out of the engineering side, right? And there used to be the old school, how it was, we may have seen it growing up where it's men play a certain role, women play a certain role, and they weren't always encouraged. And so now we're trying, and the industry is really not doing a good enough job, in my opinion, but they're trying to get, more women, more minorities in there. But the idea is you still have to encourage it, and you have to create an atmosphere to where people like that can rise up, so you have enough people or enough diversity within the pool per se of talent that you can pull from. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then there always will be a few, and then if you just do diversity for the sake of diversity, then you may not get the best candidate because you didn't create an atmosphere to begin with that encourages diversity from the get-go. And so I just think that's a really good point from my point of view.
Yeah, that's a really great point too in regards to this age of when we were using only white women or only white characters it was normalized. It was something that was pretty consistent across the board. And going outside of that would be abnormal, and abnormal things scare people. It's that aspect of change. So instead of embracing that as an opportunity to change and just do something differently, now there's a political motivation behind it. And the people who are opposed to that change now have an opposite political motivation to it, to sort of defend on their point of view. So is it that big? It's not that big of a deal. It can't be that big of a deal. I don't see people getting upset about Simba being cast as Donald Glover as opposed to Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I don't see people who are having that same outrage. Maybe it's because Donald Glover, is a he's voicing over an actual animated lion, and as opposed to the imagery that will be used for the Little Mermaid. But I do think that there's an aspect of discussion here that needs to be taken from all angles. It needs to be looked at from all viewpoints. I don't discredit anybody who says, I wanted Ariel to be exactly the way that I wanted her to be when I was a kid. I think I can identify with that, but sometimes you just don't get what you want. And sometimes you have to find other things that you enjoy about it.
That generation had its turn. Cool, you got your Ariel back when you were a kid. Now there's new kids coming up, so this is not about you, right? Like, this is about a newer generation. So
well, and that's a great point too. This is not for this. Disney is not making this solely for you, for people who watched The Little Mermaid. They're going back to the well. We could do a whole other a podcast on the fact that there's no new ideas in entertainment. There's everything as a reboot, everything as a remake, because it worked in the past, and they're going to get it to work with the new generation that's coming up. They want to give the same thing, right? So this is made for people in Gen Z and beyond, not for people who are millennials or even Gen Xers who are watching this for the second time. So that's a great point as well.
This is like off the cuff question. If you could have a remake of any of like your favorite movies or shows as a kid, which one would you do? What would you like to see?
Oh man, you got to give me a little prep time before you ask me something like that, brother. Immediate mind came to Power Rangers, but there's so many Power Rangers, and the Power Rangers reboot, they already did one, was fantastic. One of the best movie experiences I've seen in a long time. So
I feel like there's so many I haven't watched. What am I doing?
Well, that was the only one that I really thought that way was the actual live action Power Rangers film that came out in 2017, I want to say. And it was really a lot better than I thought it would be. I didn't have high expectations, but I really enjoyed it walking out.
I'll have to go back. I mean, look, I grew up with the Ivan Ooze era, and I really liked the original. Well, they were kind of original-ish. I mean, there's a few here, a few that
I grew up in that era as well. I had Ivan Ooze. I had that VHS on my nightstand growing up. I know what that much about.
VHS? Oh God, you're taking us back. Look, by the way, I feel dated when I go. Like my mother-in-law, like she just retired from being a teacher. But I would never forget. Like we did like this fun little. We went to their school. I brought in like these tablets. We did like our code. I used these things with tablets. And I'll never forget. Like these kids even asked me like, "What's a BVD?" Right, instead of a DVD. I was like, first off, you don't even know what it is, and second off, what? You don't even know what this is? I'm like, oh my goodness, I felt so dated. And by the way, here, Abigail's brought in a few more. So were people equally upset about the Will Smith being cast as a genie? I heard people were very upset. Not so much at his character, at the other character for some reason, which I'm like, oh God, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything about the genie, and that's a great point, Abigail. I wonder if that's because, and this might be out there, but I wonder if it's because white people grew up loving Will Smith, and they didn't have anything they could say. It's almost like Will Smith has that Robin Williams, sort of respect
Robin
level,
Williams,
or like Keanu Reeves respect level, where you could put him in anything and you can't be mad about it. Keanu Reeves is not that terrific of an actor.
It's so
but he's
funny.
just a great humanitarian and a great person. You can't be mad at casting him in anything.
I like the fact that she brought that up because look, Robin Williams is my dude. Like I'm so sad that he's still gone. Like that's a whole other topic for me because I'm very upset with not only upset with Robin Williams, but at the same time just people in general, right? That I felt like we should have caught this coming. But anyway, so Robin Williams, bless up. Like how you can never replace him, but that's just it, right? Like we have to remember there are certain people you can't replace, therefore you do not try to replace them. We've seen in our field, like when Jobs died, people are all the time, oh, Tim Cook, he's no Steve Jobs. Of course he's not. Why would he try to be? And he's doing his own thing. And in my opinion, I like Tim Cook much better than good old Steve Jobs. And look, no disrespect to him, but I like what Tim's doing. So, people have an issue sometimes of trying to compare. And maybe that's where some of the issue is, right? But, again, I'm not going to say that race doesn't have anything to do with it. I'm sure it may have something to do with it. But for other individuals out there, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's how do you replace an original, an OG that was so good in your mind, they're irreplaceable. So maybe that's just something to ponder on.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Is you get a vision of something, the idea of replacing it, the idea of work on it. You made a point earlier. And I'm sorry to tell you that it's happening. That Terminator is being adjusted, and it's not the same. It's not the same film or the same lines of it, but it's Dark Fate. It's got Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's got Sarah Connor, and it's
Hamilton.
got all the elements.
Ready.
All the
November.
elements of the original Terminator series is trying to be thrown at this, and it's going to be a disaster, right?
Don't you say such
be
words,
real.
David. Don't you say, I will end this thing now. Don't you say such words. Look,
let's be real.
Hey, wait.
Get the expectations up, okay, and get them where they need to be.
Hold on. How
Arnold
dare you
Schwarzenegger is not about to let's be back and jump out of an airplane and be the same effect as it was 30 years ago.
I will concede everything after Judgment Day has been a hot mess. And I did like Genesis slightly, but it was such a good concept, but it kind of fell a bit short. And I still enjoyed it, but it was nowhere near like the first two. The reason why I have a little bit more faith on this is for a few reasons. One, they got Linda Hamilton back, which she did not come back to any of them prior because she felt like the story didn't make sense. Also, Linda Hamilton and James Cameron came in with a purpose. And just like Wonder Woman in the back right there, people were like, oh, it's about time that women got to it. And James Cameron and Linda were a little salty. Like, did you not see the first Terminator versus the second one? Like, the first Terminator, you had helpless Sarah Connor, right? But at the same time, you could understand why. Like, she was a waitress, right? She figured out all these things. This machine's come to kill, like, total mind blow. But then the second film, it starts off, she's sure in an insane asylum, whatever, but she is totally ripped. She's jacked, and this lady is ready for combat. And again, I'm sure I've seen Terminator 2 more than I'm sure many people on this planet. Like, put it this way, I lost count after over 80 times. I could literally give you scene by scene of Terminator 2. But anyway, so when you look at what she did in the 90s, she was that badass character. It wasn't just Arnold, which people tend to focus on. She had a very specific role to raise a son that was going to save the fate of humanity, right? And she was nobody to be reckoned with. So now they're coming back with this mindset. Look, she is one of the main stars, and from my understanding, by the way, this is going to be the mantle pass off. The idea is that Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger, this is a direct from the second film, and that the baton will be passed off to a newer generation, as it should be, right? Because sure, they're getting older, but don't get it twisted.
James Cameron
and Linda Hamilton, they can still kick some ass.
James Cameron being on the movie gives me some hope, but I can't.
What's his name? Tim. He did Deadpool. I want to say his name was Tim.
Yes. Yeah.
Messing it up.
I'll find out. But yeah,
I think he's going to take extra care at this film. So I'm really looking forward to Dark Fate. It already has, no pun intended, Dark Fate.
Tim Miller.
Dark Fate, towards it, just because the other films were such a disaster. But look, I have a lot of faith that they're going to get this one right. So we'll see. November, unfortunately, is around the corner. Trust me, this summer will blow by. We'll be there before you know it. All right, so with that, it's time to switch topics here. So this is where it's going to get a bit... if you thought the last topic was controversial, well, we'll see where this one goes. Okay, so on this next one that I'm going to read you, and by the way, I'm going to give you some facts here. So the reason why we think that facts here matters, look, I appreciate everyone's opinions and insights, but a few things happen. First and foremost, just like my friend Ricky from the last one that we did last night, I get a lot of his points. He gave a lot of good counterpoints, but at the same time, no human being should ever think that, I can't go around thinking my experience is everyone's experience, because that's just not the way the world works, right? Your reality is your reality, but it's not everyone else's reality. And so with that, we wanted to open up the discussion. Specifically, I'm going to give you 7 ways that immigrants enrich our economy and society. And the reason why we're going here with this is there's so many false narratives out there with illegal immigrants, and it's just getting old that I can't believe a lot of people try to blame. Something I'm noticing is systematically we blame people that are not in power, where those of us and people that are in power, you have every tool to make sure that certain things don't happen, but you don't do it because it doesn't benefit you. And so this is where I think it's going to get interesting. So let me start with the first one. And this one's going to be around immigrants in general, how they contribute to job creation. And so I just wanted to read this through just to make sure I can keep it as clear as possible. But a report by the National Academic of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine found little to no effect on the wages and employment of native-born workers in the long term by undocumented immigrants. Immigrants are also entrepreneurs who create jobs, and according to a study of a bipartisan immigration bill passed in the Senate in 2014, provisions in the bill could potentially bring between 336,000 and 470,000 undocumented immigrant entrepreneurs into the formal economy. Given that the average immigrant-owned business hires 11 employees, these businesses would account for between 3 million and 5.2 million jobs in the formal economy. So that's interesting there. So I'm curious, why do people think that immigrants only take jobs but they don't create them?
I mean, they don't. Yeah, it's a great question because it's not really a fact. It's just a tired narrative that's been pushed for the last decade that immigrants are coming to this country, they're stealing the jobs of hardworking Americans. Again, there's a lot of jobs out there that we can highlight, and you could say, here's an immigrant doing this job that would not be done by an American citizen. No. Would not be done by somebody who instead works, for McDonald's or Wendy's or something like that. Fast food or simple customer service. So, there's a lot of narratives out there around immigration that stem from that idea that they're stealing hardworking jobs. Less and less have we heard that though, because I think now we're starting to understand just how little water that holds while we're watching them do this. Now, the interesting point about the article that you made, the fact that immigrant-owned businesses account for that much. I mean, when you think about what needs to be a successful entrepreneur business in the United States, that hard work, that ethic, that work ethic, immigrants have a work ethic that's almost second to none when it comes to how hard they want to work, how much time they want to spend on it, how much stake they have invested in it, just because it's literally everything that they've got. And if we were more accessible as a country to allow people who have these big dreams and who have these entrepreneur minds to come into this country and get that American dream on the table and say, here's an opportunity to make it happen, it would happen. And there would be positive growth from it. They would be able to hire people who are doing the jobs and create more jobs for the immigrants who are coming to this country who are trying to steal jobs from Americans, right? So it's a vicious cycle that is created by false narratives, by things that aren't actually true. No, when you look at there's a breakdown in that cycle that is very clearly an opening where we could actually do some really good things, but we're pretending as a country and that the current administration is pretending that it doesn't exist, and the people on that side are pretending that breakdown doesn't exist.
And by the way, if you don't mind, maybe even drop that link into the comments or whatnot so people can read it themselves. And then while you do that, I'll kind of go to the secondary one here because these things are so intriguing, so interesting. And so here's another fact. Undocumented immigrants are paying taxes. This is one of my favorites here because for some reason we still have a lot of people that believe the opposite. So undocumented immigrants pay an average of $11.64 billion in state and local taxes a year. On average, an undocumented individual has about 8% of their income go to taxes. Moreover, all immigrants, regardless of status, will contribute approximately $80,000 more in taxes than government services used in their lifetime. That's a big deal. So think about that for a second. They are putting more in of services than they actually will use. So I find the irony that we have the audacity to say, oh, well, they're just here using up all our services, where statistically that's not true. Now, on an individual level, sure, there may be that one individual that let's say does it, right? Like, whatever, goes and pulls something and let's say just wants to leech onto the system, right? Let's just run with that for a second. Still, on average, you've got more giving in than they're taking away. So, I mean, I'm trying to find, like, where does it, why does this outrage even begin? Like, this is beyond me here.
Well, we know who we're dealing with here with these discussions, and it's not based on fact. It's not based on any real numbers or evidence. My question with some of these points in the articles, how much of Trump's successful economy has to do with the fact that there's still illegal immigrants who are in this country contributing to it.
And by the way, like I just want to point out, this any president's economy, right? Whether it's Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, our economy, right? U.S. citizens, right? Because I don't want to just say Trump's economy, because whatever, like it's equally ours as it is his. But in our economy, even though he likes to claim all the greatness, but that's another point. Look, people are contributing, and that's how it works here. How do you think Social Security continues to go as long as it has? Right? This thing should have dried up.
Well,
it has not.
Social Security is a conversation for a different episode for sure. It's a fair point. The reason I call it Trump's economy here as it pertains to the legal immigration factor is because he's demonized everybody who isn't born in this country. He's made it a point to say that they're the problem and they're part of when the whole time he's celebrating a victory that may even come from that exact thing that he's demonizing. So there's a bit of poetic irony in that, but also, going forward, if the solution is to keep the economy great and to keep the economy moving in the positive direction, as it has been since before President Trump, since the Obama administration, I think it's important that we take those kinds of things into account. And we say, if we're really thinking about demonizing, separating families at the borders, doing all this for immigration that just it makes so much public noise, let's also not forget the fact that they're contributing and they're helping in large quantities. There are some people who are not, right. There's always a faction of people who aren't doing the same positive growth, but there's a big piece of it that's actually successful and that it works. So find that, harness that, make sure that is the focus, of immigration discussion, instead of talking about it like these are horrible people. Like these immigrants are not coming over here to work their ass off because they can't do it at home. They have certain opportunities at home. They're doing it here because the opportunity is greater and because the opportunity is more plentiful for their families. There's more of an opportunity. The same reason I'm here is because my ancestors made that same decision and came up with that same conclusion. It's no different, right? We're all here because we had somebody make that decision. So we can't demonize or fault people for making that decision just because they come from south of America as opposed to west of America, or rather east of America.
Yeah, exactly. It always makes me think of that because, being a biracial guy, right? It's like, look, half of me was forced, half of my ancestors were forced over here. Another half, came through likely on their own merits. But it's so interesting because sometimes people get so upset. Well, if you don't like it here, then go elsewhere, whatnot. I'm like, look, anytime I hear that type of just silliness that anybody ever says, I'm like, that's what a good way to represent. What a good way to represent. But
I'm Canadian, so I've been hearing it my entire life. Anytime I make any comment.
Such a silly argument. Go back to... No, it's like, no, like, first step is admittance, right? Like, figure out, like, something's wrong. And, and own it. Don't, turn around and go back. Oh, my goodness. Then we can all go back and just give the land to the natives. How about that? I'm sure they'd love to have it all. Okay, so here's another fact. Immigrants are helping to sustain the Social Security Trust Fund. So we kind of put it in there, but just to give you, like, some statistical data... In 2010, by the way, this was all updated in January 2019. So, TJ, if we don't like it here, we all need to leave. In 2010, undocumented individuals paid $13 billion into retirement accounts and only received $1 billion in return. So it's interesting to me. And indeed, over the years, immigrants have contributed up to $300 billion to the Social Security Trust Fund. So again, I had a friend that was making an argument earlier that people still, I guess, take their kids' Social Security numbers and sell them and, all sorts of stuff, whatever the issue may be there. But I just find it so interesting because, okay, wait a minute. At any given time, if I want to get a new credit card, they're going to do a quick check on me, and they know everything. They'll ask the questions of where I lived before. They know my age. They know my, my race. They know all this information. But you're telling me that they can't figure out that a kid or one of my that they care to correct that? No.
I'm going to be honest with you, man. I just lost you on my side.
Yeah, you did. It dropped for a second.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at this stat here that you read off, and I'm amazed at 13 billion into retirement accounts in 2010. That's an insane number for anybody in 2010. Receiving $1 billion in return. Retirement accounts are complicated. The idea is that you won't receive dividends on those for hopefully years and years and years, just because it's when you retire, right? But $300 billion in the Social Security Trust Fund. These aren't numbers that we can really shake a stick at. This is very important numbers. This is, as you put it earlier, this is one of the reasons why we're still we're still able to pull from Social Security. While that's still a somewhat of a future that we all have on the horizon.
Not
We'll see
counting
how
on
long,
it,
but
it's don't count on it. But
$13 billion in retirement accounts. I mean, this is, you say that people come over here, they steal jobs, they don't pay their taxes, they don't do the things that every American should be doing. They're just coming over here as leeches to society. How many Americans paid $13 billion into retirement accounts? This is not something that is normalized behavior for any American citizen. Yet $13 billion, that's a ton of money into IRAs and individual education accounts, whether it's traditional Roth. I mean, these are things that Americans haven't figured out yet. Seems like immigrants have a pretty good idea that they're working hard today so that they can secure their future. I got to respect that a little bit. That's a number that, to me, it just blows me away to think that they're actually, the foresight there is so heavy.
So here goes Tiffany here. So Tiffany put, you should be able to see it now. Do it legally is all I'm asking. Drug trafficking and sex trafficking is coming from the South, and it is a large problem that needs a solution of some sort, whatever that may be. So let me debunk that a little bit. It's actually not coming from the South. There's a reason why, and I'm not saying some of it isn't. Of course, some of it should be, because that's just statistically the way it is. When you go to an airport, Tiffany, you're going to see these signs, especially the bathrooms and everything else, giving you like signals or numbers you can call if you're being trafficked or trafficked. And so this happens very often on planes. People come here all the time. Like, for instance, like the president is so hell bent on the wall. But what we don't see is a lot of people just come here and overstay their visas. Like, I can go to any country. I can go to South Korea, which I've done many times, and just simply not leave. And that's what a lot of people do. So this is why I want to be very careful of saying things like, sex trafficking is not coming from the South, because no, trust me, they come on planes, they come from all over the place. There's ways to do it. It's not just there. And so I'm not saying that we shouldn't protect our borders. We should absolutely do so. But I just want to point out the problem's not exactly what you think it is. And doing it legally, I think everybody asks that, right? I think that's what we all feel, is it should be done legally. The issue is the system in which we have it shows an unfair advantage to people who take advantage of this system and doesn't care to change it, right? It's like, for instance, we blame, let's say, the illegal aliens for, and that's not even, I don't even like using that term. I'll just say like illegal immigrants, because that's a silly term. But like immigrants in general, we blame them for taking the jobs or saying, hey, they're using fake socials and everything else. But not once do I really hear people saying, okay, but what about that, that person who hired them from a small business that should say, hey, this documentation is not valid, therefore, no, we're not going to employ you. But they do it because they also get the cheap labor, they get to pay taxes underneath the table, or I should say they get to avoid taxes underneath the table. And so they're also benefiting from the system as well. And so let me bring up another one of her points, though. She says, I'm in Houston. I-10 is the gateway. Yes, it is a worldwide issue. I'm from Texas, so the South border affects me more than y'all. And look, I certainly see why you would necessarily care about that, as you should, because I think everybody should care about the border. I'm just saying that our focus has been so heavy on A, the wall, and B, that these immigrants are the issue and not really addressing the real issue. Because let's say sex trafficking. That means someone else, someone with money, someone with power is bringing them in. Go to the root, follow the money. That's all I'm saying, is you got to dive in deeper and not just demonize those people. Because it's just like in Alabama, right? Like the pregnant lady gets shot, therefore we got to arrest and try to prosecute the pregnant lady for getting shot with a child, right? Like some of it is just crazy. Anyways, Jeremy, any thoughts there? Because I can go on and on that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to find some good facts to support what I'm going to talk about here, but Tiffany has some points that are made on a regular basis, and there's a lot of people who share those opinions now. Views, yeah. Tiffany, I'm in Texas as well. I'm in Dallas-Fort Worth, and I came from Florida, originally from Canada, so I've been all over the place, and I've seen a lot of different opinions and different variations of immigration concerns. As far as the Mexican border goes, the amount of people crossing the Mexican border who are not Mexican is almost twice the people who are Mexican. So the idea that there's people south of the border who are trying to just walk over into the United States and just put up shop and this is my country now. That's a misnomer, and it's not actually factual. It's more people from countries that are a little bit more refugee based, trying to get away from really dangerous circumstances. They're sending their families on very dangerous journeys and voyages so that they can actually have that security. The asylum seeking policies is something we talked about a few nights ago. So I don't want to get too far into it, but the procedure is insanely complicated. It takes way too much time, and most importantly, it costs way too much money. So Tiffany, I would ask you the same. I would ask you to consider this: if the United States was ever in a place where you did not feel safe and your family didn't feel safe, and the only option you had to guarantee security was to risk, breaking the law to send your family to a place that was more safe, that was more secure. Let's reverse things, and let's say that country is Mexico. Would you go about trying to save and to contribute thousands and thousands of dollars first, or would you try to get into that country and then get to that point where security and that's why we have this issue of people overstaying their visas as refugee asylum seekers. There's so many fake and false statistics out there that are just generated by absolutely no context that you could make the argument that but there's more people crossing the border by plane than there are by actually walking over. So
of course, every day.
That sort of defeats the entire purpose of this southern border being the issue, because just like they're coming from everywhere. They're coming from all over the place. The ports of entry are more likely to be somewhere on the outside of water based than they are actually land based. So you could literally spend all day talking about just how much false information there is out there and how much context is needed to explain some of these statistics. My overreaching point, and the thing that I would say when it comes to immigration, is that there needs to be a better system in place that encourages the growth that they can provide. And your article that you're quoting these stats from talks about how much they can provide to the economy. There is absolutely no reason why we need to look at ourselves as the United States and say, like, we're overcrowded, we don't have enough space for people. Of course we do. We've got tons of space that's available that we could actually get hardworking people new jobs, new opportunities. We have tons of places where we can open up an opportunity to create a community based around something like that. There's absolutely no reason that's actually justified or verifiable in my mind that you could say there should not be a better immigration policy in place to completely take people away. Now you say, oh, well, they need to be vetted properly. Sure, I agree with that.
Of course.
I think that's 100% a valid thing. Now, how can you vet somebody who comes from a country that doesn't keep records to know what kind of person they are? Great question.
Another issue. Yeah.
That's where you have to come up with a better policy or a better procedure around it. Or that's where you come up with something. Maybe there's a monitoring system. Maybe there's we will give more freedom to somebody who's leaving prison after completing a hefty sentence for a crime they've committed. We do a lot of monitoring of something like that. You're telling me we can't monitor somebody who comes into the country for the first time, to bring a better life for their family? These are some just general thoughts that have to have questions asked about them in order to actually find a solution that works. The one solution that doesn't work, building a wall, creating this false narrative and peddling this false narrative that they're the issue and that they're all rapists, drug dealers, and fear-mongering.
I had to put out there, somebody tried to say, one of the first ones we did here, they're like, oh, the president didn't call them rapists and murderers. I'm like, yeah, he did. And his words after that, but I assume some are good. Some are good. No, most are good, and very little. And it's funny because we do have actual statistics that show that native, actual American citizens are extremely more highly likely to commit a crime, especially if you're here illegally. The one thing you try to do, you try to lay low. You don't try to get yourself in trouble. That's just...
Well, and what's funny to me about the drug dealing, nothing funny about it. Let me reword that. But what's ironic to me about this is we say, and the president says, that they're bringing drugs over the borders. What are they doing with those drugs when they get over the borders? Do you think they're the ones that are dealing it? Do you think they're the ones that are sharing it with their communities?
No.
Or are there organized drug cartels within the United States with American citizens who are dealing these horrible opioids that are coming from Mexico?
Supply and demand. If we didn't I would recommend use it, this would not be an issue.
I would recommend everybody go check out the show on Netflix. Dope. It highlights
Such a
not
good
just
show.
the Mexican opioid, sort of farming and the development or the creation of the drugs, but also when it gets to the United States, how they get it. I mean, there's no way that those aren't actors, right? Like that's my thoughts on it. Because what organization of drug dealers would be like, yeah, Netflix, bring a few cameras in here, but it does create a dramatic image of what that looks like afterwards. These are American citizens. These are bad people who are from this country, who were born in this country, who are completing the mission that Trump is blaming and that certain Republicans are blaming illegal immigrants on. So you can't actually credit them with everything. You can't blame the opioid crisis on MS-13 when MS-13 is maybe bringing them over the line and then giving it to the Bloods and the Crips, and they're the ones that are actually doing the distribution of fentanyl and heroin with fentanyl in it. So
in other words, a very broad problem. And so Timmy says, LOL, so just let them all in because we were buying it. No, that's definitely not what we're saying. It's definitely not what we're saying at all. What we're trying to do is we're trying to broaden that this is not just an illegal immigrant issue. It goes much further than that. And we are a part of the problem. When I say we, it is our demands as a country. It is things that we do that fuels this issue. Let me give you another example. If we keep having, let's say, trade wars, and let's say we devastate Mexico's economy, what do you think they're going to do? Cause and effect. If you blow up their economy and they're not doing so well, of course you're going to cause a large drove to come to the border, right? So all I'm saying is some actions that we have and that we do can inadvertently affect them, just like some of their actions and some of the things that they do inadvertently affects us, just like them contributing to our economy. And Tiffany, I think you bring up a good point here, right? You're like, I agree, but we have to start somewhere. Exactly. And so a part of the reason why Jeremy and I are trying to do what we're doing is we want to start that conversation, get it out there. We don't want to demonize anybody that has opposing views, but we just have to have these right conversations, put out the facts, and then take this emotion away. Because again, I totally understand why some people feel the way that they do and some of the fears. I totally get it. But our fears are always much greater than the real problem is. Like, let me give you an example. This is kind of like off of it. But look, I have a stupid fear of sharks in the water, and I avoid going in depth. But statistically, a lot of people don't get bit going out into the ocean. But my fear is so strong that it prohibits me from going out there. The difference is I'm self-aware. I know the issues. I know the facts. And I deal with it, and it only affects me. But if my fear, let's say if I had some sort of weird power where I can keep people off the beaches and I don't let people go off of the beaches, well, now I'm starting to affect everybody else on my fear, and that's where I think the leadership, they got to get it together, stop fear-mongering, get the facts, and make decisions.
That's an interesting analogy. I've never really thought about it that way, because that's a very low number of people who are affected by shark attacks on the beach.
64-ish were bit
but
last year.
If you were to go to the beach and you were to say, we need to build a wall on the ocean because there are sharks that hurt people in the ocean and we need to protect these people, and one person that gets bit by a shark and, a million people to go to the beach, you take that one person and say, see, this is why we need to keep everybody out of the water and keep everybody. It's a small example, but it's fear mongering, and it's based around absolutely so little data that supports anything that's being said here. And I just want to comment on Tiffany's point for just a second. When you say let them all in because we're buying it, no, that's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's not a Mexico problem. Mexico is, sure, that's where some of the drugs are coming from. And if you think that there's any possible way that we can stop all of the drugs from coming into Mexico, then we should do that. But you should also acknowledge the fact that it's not a wall. A wall is not going to stop the drugs coming in because that's not where they're coming in. They're not coming in over the border by foot. If you say just keep everything about the border closed entirely, we have aspects of our border that's closed that are infiltrated by drugs. Drugs will always find their way into the United States. I think that's something we absolutely have to acknowledge. There's no way to stop 100% of the drugs from coming into the United States. So building a border wall for $20 billion, how much policing, how much actual law enforcement of drugs in the United States could be spent with $20 billion in added funds? That's the kind of question that doesn't get asked, because it's not. People in politics seem to think that it's not that simple. It is that simple. You're asking for somebody to take $20 billion out of the budget that we already don't have. I mean, let's just acknowledge that.
The deficit's pretty high.
But you're talking about putting it into a border wall for what? For what purpose? Where is the data that says that's going to affect anything? Tiffany, to your point, we have to start somewhere. What's the solution? How is that the solution? And I'm not saying you agreed with that or supported that. I'm not making any assumption. But that is the overreaching narrative that the way to stop drug trade and the way to stop drugs from coming to the United States is with a border wall. That's not true. So, in my mind, if you admit that drugs are going to come in no matter what, take some extra time and police the people in the United States who are actually causing this problem, who are actually part of the issue here.
So 2 points, Jeremy, right? Because, so one, my dad always had a saying, and I love it, gated neighborhoods, right? I live in one. And you know what it does? It keeps the common man out. If somebody wants to get over that wall, they're going to get through that gate. I watch it happen. Whether they'll stop somebody. I've had somebody one time get out, hop through. If they really want away, that's not going to solve it. It's silly. And secondary, a part of it is our fault because we don't challenge, Trump enough to say, hey, look, we know you promised this stupid wall, but guess what? You don't need to fulfill it. Because something tells me, and again, I'm kind of going on a limb here, but I don't really think he really wants to build. He just feels obligated to build this wall. Just people still chant, lock her up, Hillary, but guess what? She ain't getting locked up. That's not going anywhere. He tried.
It's the same, right? It's the same reason he put Trump on his buildings.
So if we could just get past this wall thing.
It's the symbolism. It's the imagery.
All right, well, we got to move on for the sake of time here, but here's another fact. So the number of undocumented immigrants in the United States has remained the same in recent years. So in 2014, there were 11 million undocumented individuals in the United States. This number has remained unchanged from 2009 and represents a decline from 12.2 million undocumented individuals who resided in the United States in 2007. And so this is interesting to me because, yes, sometimes you see those droves, and this is where the media, I think we can kind of all agree here, the media is not really doing a good enough job here, the media. And so, this just goes with that fear-mongering again, so many people are trying to get in. And unfortunately, the issue's really exploded right now because of what we got going on, the way we're treating children. We know Obama definitely did not have a perfect record when it came to what he did with immigrants and whatnot, because, they used to call him, what was his nickname? It's Deporter-in-Chief or something of that nature. He was gangster. He deported a lot of people, and not all those policies did I agree with. And so I want to point that out because it's look, even though, as of recent times, I consider myself a registered Democrat just because I can't anymore. This recent administration has just destroyed any faith of me of having a Republican. I think the Schwarzeneggers and the John McCains, they're pretty much gone at this point. They stay silent. But anyway, so this clearly is just overstated. And I'm going to move on to the second one here, what's kind of clumped in this together. So another fact is DACA recipients are contributing to the economy. So check this out here, because we know Trump tried to kill this one off, and I think right now, what's the situation on DACA, Jeremy? Just a quick little overview.
Let's see. 536 unauthorized immigrants are enrolled in DACA as of 2019, April, and Mexico is the origin country with the most active recipients by far. Trump ordered the end to DACA on September 17, but they can remain in the program while federal courts are still considering the cases. So it's still being deliberated. I don't think this has ever really been a concern for most people that I know. I know a few DACA recipients personally here in Texas, and I know that their thought is this is just going to be litigated in courts until it doesn't matter to me personally. So it's kind of
I see the point, but it's kind of messed up. Anyway, so DACA recipients, people who came to the United States at a young age and applied for a deferred action for childhood arrivals, check this out, paid a $465 fee with their applications, meaning that the program has not cost taxpayers a single cent. And that's important because we know a lot of people like to complain about the money situation. So they're not taken from you, they're paying for it. And since this program began in 2012, more than 750,000 individuals have had their applications for DACA approved, and the U.S. economy has benefited. The cost of ending the DACA program would eliminate at least $433.4 billion from the GDP over the course of a decade. And when I hear that, I'm just looking and I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing? It's not making any sense.
The DACA issue, I think, was the one point in politics and this is one that I called my grandfather, who's no longer with us, when this was going on. As a conservative House of Commons member in Canada, he wrote a lot of laws around immigration, around these kinds of issues. Very conservative man, extremely conservative. And when I talked to him about this specific issue, he could not understand why it was being litigated in such a public fashion. He couldn't understand, and he said the reason that this is as much of an issue as it actually is because it has been made public. It has been made personal to every person who doesn't have a stake in it, and everybody has an opinion about it, even though they don't know anything about it. He said if there was any semblance of actual dignity within the U.S. House of Representatives when discussing this issue, they would do it behind closed doors, and they would do it with people who are involved in the DACA program, people who have a stake in it. And the fact that it wasn't his opinion and sort of the opinion that I share from that is it was made public because it was political, and because it was the fact that we are playing now with a lot of people's well-being and their livelihood, people who at one point thought they might have to be sent back to a country they've never lived. That is a telling point, and it was a telling point in our American political system, where it wasn't about actually making positive change. It was more about flexing and specifically for this president trying to do something that really pleases the part of his base that he pretends doesn't exist.
Yeah, and that's messed up. I mean, how are you going to send a human being back to a country that they never lived? Right? That's like all of a sudden changing laws. You got tired of, black folks being back here, and you're trying to, I don't know where you're going to send me, right? Because, half of me is from like France and Germany, and the other port is Nigeria. So what are you gonna do? That's just absurd to me, right? Like that's clearly not a solution. And not only that, but it's just a cold thing to do, and that's where I draw the line. Like I don't want any part of that. Like send somebody back to a country they've never been to. You want to talk about, and this is kind of like off topic here, but bear with me for a second. You talk about creating hate for a country and creating terrorists. This is a bad way to do it, right? Like, I'm going on a limb here, but if you take somebody's life, you turn it upside down, send them to a place that's already terrible, then those people may look and go, the Americans, whatever, they don't like you, they hate us. I mean, this is how you just create hatred in the world. There's got to be a better way to do it. This is just not the way. This is just silly to me. All right, so here's another fact. And we're getting towards the end of it here. And Tiffany, you brought up a point, so I'm going to come back to that. So here's a fact. Immigration reform would reduce the deficit. So here goes another one, right? Especially to my strong Republicans here that are concerned about money, unless Trump is in office, then this is where it's going to make the difference. So according to the Congressional Budget Office, the bipartisan immigration bill that passed in the Senate in 2014 would have helped reduce the deficit by $197 billion, and that's a big chunk, increased investment by 2%, and increase overall employment by 3.5% by the year 2023. That's huge.
That is huge, and that's not a new figure for people who have seen and understood what goes on. And I'm sitting here reading Tiffany's comment, and I appreciate that comment. Because go ahead and put it up
read
there.
It and respond to it. I'm posting it up now so anyone can see it, but go ahead.
So Tiffany says, I think it's easy for us to give our opinions, but I don't think anyone fully knows the picture the executive leaders know. We're told issues on the need-to-know basis. The news is so biased, and I don't even trust 99% of anything reported anymore because it's all about getting more likes these days. I don't really fear any of these issues. I speak my opinion without getting upset that your opinion may be different. There's a lot of really great points there. And the one I want to comment on is the first point you made. I think it's easy to give our opinions. We don't know what the full picture of our executive leaders know. That's either untrue or it's a big problem. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. We are not the peons of the American business model. We are the shareholders. We are 100% involved in every decision that should be made. That's why we get a say in voting. If we don't know what's going on with the executive office or with what's going on in our Congress, that's an issue. We need to educate ourselves on that. We need to take every opportunity in the world. And to your second point, 99% of anything reported anymore is all about getting likes. Yes, that's true. That's always been the case. That has never changed. That has always been about ratings. It's always been about getting more views. Back when there was four channels on the television, the president was on every single one because they knew that people would be watching the president speak. And there wasn't a single channel that didn't want to have it on there. That was 50, 60 years ago. This has not changed. It has gotten a lot more complicated, and it's gotten a lot more prevalent. but you can never trust the news. Ralph Waldo Emerson, if you pay attention to the media, if you involve yourself in the media, if you don't, rather, you're uninformed. If you do, you're misinformed. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that a long time ago. This is not a new idea. Now, that point, there's a lot more information out there now. You can go and Google anything that we're talking about right now, have way more information than the average person because there's so much that's out there. And yes, you will have to do your best to vet the sources to make sure that what you're reading is actually true, make sure that it's actually relevant to the point that you're trying to make or the point that you're trying to contest. However, it's available. It's readily available. So make sure that, when we're discussing these things, Tiffany, I really appreciate that comment, but I would challenge you and everybody else who wants to be involved in this discussion, do so with as much information as you possibly can. This is how we take back our country as the taxpayers. This is how we get involved in the executive process the way that we should be, and the way that our founding fathers back in 1776 and 1784, the way that they said that we would be part of it. And that's how we do it.
Yeah, and by the way, first off, nice picture, Tiffany, right? Nice profile picture. Like, I know Tiffany personally. What a good profile picture. But anyways, I digress. So here's your first one. So, like, Jeremy, you're absolutely right. Like, and like, I see what she's saying, right? Like, they get a lot more data. But here's the problem with that. Unless it has to do with national security, we should have access to it. And that's why we have things like, you can go to foia.gov, which is, you got your Freedom of Information Act. This is how, like, for instance, we found out that Trump during the 4th of July inquired that he wanted to use military tanks and everything else. Because, like, the White House is denying any sort of budget request that we want to know how much money he spends because he just blackballs everything. But we can go and get that information. And no, I would disagree with that. When it comes to statistics on immigration, that is not a national security. Border is, sure. But a lot of these things out there, especially notice how they're used for political purposes. They only give you the fear-mongering, but they don't give you any numbers. No, they can give you those numbers. So I see where you're making that correlation that has to do with national security. But this is not like it's a very specific person's name, someone's undercover, something that should be redacted. In other words, if this were, let's say, a part of the Mueller report, and it had information about immigration, that should be, there's no reason to redact that information. So no, there's nothing that needs to be hidden from view that's going to put our government or someone at risk, in other words. So I want to draw that comparison. But I see your point. And also, the news is biased. Okay, newsflash, every single human being is biased, right? The one thing that I just get annoyed with, and this is not at you, Tiffany, directly, but it's just a word with bias. People use that so loosely these days, right? Well, you're just biased. Well, of course I am. No crap, I'm a human being. Yes, I am biased. The difference is I'm self-aware, I understand to the point, and I'm trying to come to some sort of general consensus, right? Like, how do we move from here? But everybody is, because everybody has their own views. And my only thing with the news is this. When you get to the point where you don't trust anything, this is how we get to the flat earthers, right? Like, it is clear. You could go up very high, see the curvature of the earth. We've seen pictures from outer space, but people can't believe, you muddy the water so much that nobody wants to believe anything. And that's very unfortunate. And this is why you have to have trusted sources. Because even the information you're telling now, that is from some sort of source that you trust. And so you just have to do your due diligence and do your best to get as many samples as possible and to come to a decision and do critical thinking. And that's where I draw the line there. Critical thinking is important. Like, I look at, let's say, immigration. This is why I take a different stance on it. Because it's like, okay, I hear you. There could be a national security. There could be murders, all this stuff. Okay, cool. Now, let's start to look at some of the data. Let me dig in deeper and let me come to some sort of thought here. And my issue is, many people, and I can tell you right now, like, for instance, even books, common things, people don't read anything. We talked about this the other night where, you could turn around, let something go viral and post up online of, like, let's say, an article, and people will just read the headline and respond off the headline. And if they read the article, sometimes that headline is misleading, and I can quickly assess who actually read it and who didn't. And people fall in that trap all the time. And I get it. Everything's pinging for our attention. We got so many notifications coming through. You may have limited time. I understand it. But hey, we just have to do our due diligence, get the information, get the facts, critically think, talk through it, walk through it, talk to somebody that because there's chances somebody who is, just has an illegal status, right? That they're undocumented. there is somebody and if you are somebody that they would trust that wouldn't necessarily turn them in. Look, I've talked to people who went through that process. Jeremy, I know you went through it. There's a few people that I've worked with and I just know personally that have gone through that process, whether it's for themselves or through a spouse. And all of them say a similar thing is, if I had to do, I would hate to have to do this again. It cost crazy amount of money and took a ridiculous amount of time.
And I was actually fortunate that I didn't have to. I was born with the most complicated citizenship situation or status that I've ever seen. Every time I go get my driver's license done or anything like that, it's like somebody gets called over for a little bit of help from the person that's helping me. But my father, my dad in Florida, recently went through a citizenship process. Mm-hmm. He's been in the United States for 20 plus years. He wasn't a United States citizen. He was a citizen of Canada living domestically in the United States. And even somebody who has been here this whole time, and his thought was he better get it fixed before anything happens, right? Since 2016, he started thinking about that pretty intently. But since he's been there so long, it still costs thousands and thousands of dollars to obtain citizenship from somebody who's been paying thousands and thousands of dollars in taxes, somebody who's been adding thousands and thousands of dollars to the U.S. economy consistently for the entire time that he's been here. That system is broken. That system, like, if he was a lesser man, he wouldn't care, and I wouldn't blame him. It's if it's not broke, don't fix it. For him, if it is broke for the U.S. government to have somebody living here for that long, legally, not illegally, he wasn't here as an alien or he wasn't here illegally, and then being able to call himself an American citizen, vote in elections, and celebrate his right as an American. That costs thousands and thousands of dollars. There's something that's wrong with that. There's something that is an issue, and that's somebody who is not the typical illegal immigrant. That's somebody you would see, and you would say, "Oh, they're from Florida." That he doesn't look Mexican. He's not, he's not brown.
Go to jail. They get out of jail, and we retracted their right to vote, right? Which I don't agree with. I just don't. I'm like, no. If you're living here, and again, taxation without representation, the whole issue to begin with. Look, I don't care what they did. If they got out, they do have a right to vote. I know that's going to be a little controversial in its own, but no, people have voice, people have an opinion. You do.
We'll do another episode on that one.
It is. What's that?
So we'll do another episode on that one.
Yeah,
I want to get a lot of conversation.
And by the way, like Tiffany, a couple good points you brought was, I don't trust anything without researching it first is what I mean. I know you personally, so I know that is likely true. And then Tiffany, it is more opinions versus facts. Yes, exactly. Headlines are being misleading is my entire point. And so with that, like I'll come to the final point as we kind of open it up and we'll conclude here is the last fact. Immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans. So we kind of highlighted on this earlier. But
that's a for me, right? I mean, like that should be common knowledge for everybody.
You would think, but common sense is not so common. So studies have confirmed that immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans, and they are associated with lower crime rates. Additionally, in countries that have put in place policies to limit cooperation with immigration enforcement and to uphold the Fourth Amendment, there are lower crime rates than in countries without the sanctuary policies. Very interesting.
I mean, again, that's something that's not surprising to me. That's something that the fact that has to be highlighted, that, they're not murderers, rapists, drug dealers, like that, it speaks to the entire spirit of this discussion more than anything. It's the final point. It's the coup de grace. Mm-hmm. Mexicans are not murderers. They're not rapists. They're not. You've got a lot more danger from somebody who grew up in your backyard than you do from somebody who walked in over the border.
It's like saying Americans are racist. Right? Like, you could try to say, hey, Americans are racist. You guys want to kick everybody out. You want to place a Muslim ban everything else. I mean, is that true? And I would still say, no, of course it's not true. So I'm not going to let the minority of people that are represent the mass majority. And I think the same has to be true here.
Yeah, agreed. And, before we get too far, before we start closing up shop here, the point that Tiffany just made, it's more opinions versus facts. Headlines being misleading is my entire point. I think this kind of highlights that, this idea that you're afraid, or some people, not you, but people who are afraid of the idea of like that border security is national security because there's a few instances where that has been the case, while ignoring and totally just being ignorant to the facts, which are there's a lot more danger here in the United States. There's a lot more danger from people who were born here, who grew up here. mass shootings and terrorist attacks on American soil are not carried out by people who weren't born here typically. That's a fact. So the idea that ignoring the facts in favor of headlines, I think there's one side of the discussion here who does that far more than others. And if you talk about ignoring facts, there's a lot of facts out there about how much the current administration has put out false information, has straight up lied to the public. And I think it's important that we hold that administration accountable and ask for specific details when he does that and when the administration does that. That's how we start to get away from opinions. That's how we start to get away from not knowing what's going on in our executive branches and what's going on with legislation. Tiffany, your points here are spot on. You're making some very good discussions. But I think it's important for people who make those points to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing? Who am I supporting? Who's in my backyard when it comes to who I'm voting for? I would counter that, and I would say that probably needs a little more investigation.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can't even respect science and understand climate change is a thing, right? Like, our president totally dismisses it. And to me, that is, like, again, just one of those full stop situations where I'm like, yo, if you can't even believe in science, whatever, the teleprompter even turned on there apparently, right? Like, I just hear nothing but excuses, excuse after excuse. And I'm like, look, at some point, we've got to put back into respect the United States and stop feeding into this. Because it's gone way too far for way too long. And so here's Tiffany's other point. I think everyone will view things only in a way that will support their views, good and bad. I try to be open-minded and willing to change my view as evidence is presented to me that makes sense. And, again, because I personally know you, like, that I believe. But the problem is there's a lot of people that have the voices or the opposite. Or, and other times, they know what's true, but because it doesn't benefit them and can hurt them, they state otherwise. Right? Like, Again, everybody can be bought to a degree. I mean, look, if you want to pay me, let's say something absurd, right? Let me just give you like stupid money. Like, say, hey, Terrence, we'll pay you $1 trillion to say something. Look, you can pay me $1 trillion and I'll argue with you till you blue in the face that I'm not even from this planet. Like, I'll come up with the most ridiculous thing and I'll argue with you when people are incentivized or have money behind it, people will do crazy things. Just like, let me give you a more simpler form. If you lied and you got caught in that lie, or you told the lie so often where you got to believe it, you got to repeat it, you just do it to protect yourself over it, right? So, like, I understand that human element behind it, but at some point, it's like we got to call it for what it is. We got to stop making excuses. And the one thing that I certainly don't like is just because now, like, this is just me personally, because I'm doing things like being more vocal about it. I do podcasts about it. People say, oh, well, Terrence, I didn't hear you call out Obama when this happened or Bush when this happened. And it's like, yeah, no crap, right? I'm trying to be nice with the swearing because I swear like nobody's business. But anyway, so of course, like, yeah, I'm not going to call out every single thing. You know what? The good news is I've been more active because of this administration now than ever. But the good news is it's going to follow me. And you know what? Better to speak now than to never up. And I'm not going to accept that as an excuse to justify that it's okay. It's like me going to court and saying, oh, but Judge, Your Honor, all these other people were speeding and you didn't pull them over. What do you think that judge is going to say to me? He's going to look at me and be like, yeah, but you got caught. Tough, like, right? Like, this president, whatever, cool. Other people got away with it. Not really cool. But you know what? You're getting caught. You start a fight with everybody. You try to undermine our own intelligence. He deserves everything that's coming at him. All the toughness. I'm tired of him playing. He's the most whiny president I've ever heard. Like, always complaining that something's turned on him, the media's against him, everything else. Well, when you keep saying that they're the enemy, that you bash them, that you cut them off, that you try to even keep them off of the lawn to not ask you any questions, you're creating problems for yourself. You're not trying to work in a bipartisan way. You're not trying to get anything across. I mean, he's in trouble now with a federal judge from the Supreme Court when it comes to the consensus, because they say, hey, no, we're not going to ask these questions. We come to disagreement because the Supreme Court shut it down, which this is the Supreme Court, and yet the man that's supposed to uphold the rule of law went against it, had called both lawyers in and said, wait a minute, I just heard just saw a tweet from Trump saying that we are moving forward with these questions, and now I want everything on my desk by 2 p.m. on Friday, which That was this past Friday, so I'm sure we're going to hear about it. But I mean, this is crazy. This is where we're at in America, where no one can be trustworthy of anything. And you know what? That is where I believe, and I'm going on a tangent here, but just bear with me. This is where I believe, like, the Russians had a reason to try to put somebody like Donald Trump in office. Because this is where it is literally unraveling America and bringing out the worst in everybody. And I just wish everybody would get their crap together. This is not high school. This is not, prom queen Democrat, prom queen, Republican. Stop choosing sides. Do what's right. Stick by your morals. Have some sort of stance, not only just for yourself morally, but for the country, and speak on it. And who cares who's on what party?
Yeah, and the last
fact is fact. End of line.
Yeah, and I think the last point that we can make just regarding that same level of thinking is if you believe in something strong enough, defend that belief. Don't defend it based on somebody else's words. Don't defend it based on some statistics that you read that only support a faction of that belief. Defend your motivation. Defend why you believe that. I believe that immigration is something that we should reform in this country because I know that there's a lot of people who are battling certain aspects of immigration right now. I don't think that the small percentage of immigrants who are coming over to this country for the wrong reasons should detract from that. I don't think that they should be the reason behind that. And I could provide you all kinds of data and things to support that, but you're not going to change my opinion because my morals, my motivation will not change. I think there's too many people who are suffering in favor of a false narrative, fear-mongering, to your point. So defend your laurels, stand on them, defend them, shout them from the rooftops, make sure that you have evidence to support them, but don't let somebody else write your own story for you. Don't let somebody else write your op-ed, so to speak, and put it in the New York Times. Write your own damn story and make sure that when you write it, you've got some real personal feelings and vitriol behind it.
Yeah, no doubt. So as we get ready to just come to a close here, so I appreciate it, Tiffany. I know you've been the most vocal person today. Thank you for that. Jeremy and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And everything Jeremy just said, that goes to both sides, right? I mean, every day I find out, I always come to the table with this. In a sense, I know nothing, right? In the grand scheme of things, I'm super young, even at 36. What I'm saying is, like, just in a worldview, there's no way I can ever learn truly everything that there is. And so there just comes to a point that I got to look at it, use a little bit of a moral compass and say, okay, well, what's the right thing to do, right? What should we be doing with it? And then take that approach and move forward with that. I just think that we're in trouble when we really get into this huge nationalism type of mindset and we get very tribal. And we'll just unravel it. We'll just literally just unravel ourselves. And so again, Tiffany says here, you're passionate about immigration, but you have a personal experience related to it. Jeremy, I know that was definitely.
I don't have any Mexican family members that have tried to make it in this country. Specifically, immigration is a large topic, but this discussion of southern border immigration, I'm passionate about that for a much different reason.
And so, if you don't mind, what is that reason?
Because I don't like to see anybody suffer, right? Like this country was based around the idea that we're going to give me your tired, give me your poor. There's full stop. That doesn't say like only from Europe on the Statue of Liberty. That's not a asterisk. They've got to have it on there at all times.
And give me your tired, give me your poor. See, very interesting.
Yeah. So I think that's just more what represents this country that I have lived in, that I call myself a citizen of, and so I do think that it's a bit of a it's an issue, and it's something that I care about and I'm passionate about, and I will defend it because that's what Americans should do. They should defend the country that they love so much. Patriotism should not go to standing in your barbecue in the yard at a barbecue on 4th of July wearing your American flag boxer shorts, holding your Trump 2020 flag, drinking Bud Light. Yes. That's not patriotism.
Please preach.
Patriotism
those people are the worst, right? Like, I'm just gonna say how I feel about it. Those people are the worst. Like, look, just because you wear it or whatever, like, whoop-de-doo, right? Like, every time the president hugs the flag, church, you're so patriotic. No, look, I don't care what you hug. You can go hug any and everything anytime. It doesn't mean necessarily you truly believe and support it. I want to see action.
I want people who look at the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution as it was signed and written back when the 4th of July independence was an actual big deal, when becoming a country was priority. I want people who look at that and say, this is what we need to base our opinions on. Now, some people do that only on a couple of issues. They pick and choose what they want to Second Amendment. But if you have the whole thing in front of you and you can actually make that distinction that this is a country that was based around immigrants, this is a country that was based around people who were saying, I need to get away from a situation where I'm oppressed, I'm disadvantaged. The United States are a place where I can call home. Come over here and we'll make it a home for you. There's plenty of room. There's plenty of resources. Hell, I would encourage Canada to adopt a very similar mentality. I know they haven't, publicly, but they always have been that way. Canada's borders are probably less strict than the United States. But the problem is people don't want to live in Canada because it's too damn cold, which I absolutely cannot. I cannot blame them. But if it's better to be frozen than to be, sort of the subject of attack in your country, then people will make that decision. They still have to defend that in Canada. There's a faction of people in Canada who are saying refugees don't belong in Canada. So we have to just get away from that. In North America, we have the ability to, we have the power to, we have the space to, we have the resources to. So we just need that motivation internally that says right is better than wrong. And we are wrong for thinking that we shouldn't do this.
All right, so with that, hey Tiffany, maybe you need to join us another point. I like the fact that she's passionate about anything attacking law enforcement because she worked in it. I think that is actually another interesting topic because that's somewhat of an issue we have in America right now, unfortunately. So that'll definitely be a topic for another day. And then the last thing I'll ask you, Jeremy, before we go, and as I'll ask you as I'll tell you. So just really quickly, the main reason I chose to do this, like for those of you who may know, like in that upper left-hand corner of the screen that you should be seeing. So the name of my podcast in particular is Those Conspicuous Millennials. And the reason why I came out with that is, like, millennials get so much credit, but so much crap for everything, right? You notice that? Like, oh, cool, whatever, they're the hip, they're the ones that know technology the most, so on and so forth. But also apparently we're the worst. Like, we have not the mind span. What are you talking about? Like the attention span of a goldfish, right? Like, right. Oh yeah, oh Jeremy, oh, and then I move on to the next thing, right? So it's like we get all this praise, but we get all this beat down. And so the idea is, and I put in there as highlighted, it's not about you, it's about an us situation. Not necessarily us as the millennials, but like people in general. And so like the four light bulbs I have there's like the four brains, the four ideas, meaning there's multiple different sections. Like everybody has their own thoughts, their own opinions, and we work better together than we do apart. Man was never meant to live individual. There's a reason why we have communities, and that's how we thrive. And so I think when it comes to this sort of thing, I want to do this because it is a way, not only as an outlet for me to share my own thoughts and opinions and ideas, because I like to move those things forward, but it's also how I grow, is to get some of those challenges, to hear opposing views, because so many people subscribe to only the like-minded. Yep. And I think, for lack of a better term, that's dangerous, right? Like, that's how you don't grow as a human being. And I know more than I don't of human beings who can't evolve. They never will evolve. It's sad to say. Like, they will finish out the many years that they have left in their life never really growing as a human being. And that's really sad, right? If you look at the capacity and the potential that we have, it's such a sad thing to see that so many people have boxed themselves in and locked themselves in. And so when I look at children, because people say, oh, children, they're so smart, they learn so well. I'm like, yeah, the reason is because they don't let their past experiences dictate anything. Everything's new to them. They're a sponge. They're trying to learn. That's why they do well. Not because you're older. If anything, you should be able to learn better. You should be able to say, okay, new environment, or again, even same environment, similar things, but it's like each of my days is the same to a degree, right? Like I'm at home, I have a routine and so on and so forth, but every day is different. And so I have to come with that open mind to try to learn as much as possible. And so people don't grow. I want to try to stimulate that. And let me be selfish. It is equally for me as well to grow as a human being. So that's why I chose to do this. And Jeremy, I'm just curious because as my friends have privately messaged, they really like you, by the way. So what has really gotten into you of why you want to do this type of thing anyway, specifically when it comes to podcasting and having a voice?
Well, number one, I think it's such an important conversation to have, these kinds of conversations. The only representation that we really get exposure to is the media, which we just spend a lot of time bashing, basically for the same reason. Now, we don't have advertisers. We don't have people who we're trying to appease in these discussions. I'm not trying to reach out to any one group of people. If anything, I'm trying to reach out to the group of people who disagree with me to say that this is sort of something that give you a different way of thinking about it. And I would encourage anybody who disagrees with me to give me a different way of thinking about it. The best example I can give, and I know I keep coming back to this, my grandfather was politics. He's when he passed away back in January, I was in Canada for the funeral, and I had members of the Conservative Party of Canada who are now public in the public space, now representatives of each province, coming up to me and saying, when are you going to do this? When are you going to start representing the public? And it was so obvious to me how much those conversations that I had with my grandfather meant to him, and they meant to me as well. And we could not disagree more. We could not be any more opposed on everything. And yet we had these productive conversations where I took away learning from it. He took away learning from it. We at times we would be upset with each other after the phone call was over, or we would sort of just say, well, you're not going to see it my way and I'm not going to see it your way. And that's okay. But the fact of the matter is he came at it from a place of, I get this business. I understand how this works. And I came at it from a place of, I'm your audience. I'm the people who are going to be making these decisions that the politicians, he was retired at the time, but those politicians are going to be reaching out to. So politics for me is so important because it's not black and white. There is gray area. And in this country, we have done such an unfortunate disservice to anybody who wants to talk about politics on social media, wants to have a discussion about it. They say, don't talk politics or religion at work. Religion, I get. There's a little bit of black and white definition there. But politics should not be something that we're turned away from each other by.
So
the reason that politics should bring people together is because it's a faction that we're all involved in. We all vote. We all share an opportunity to put our voices out there. So while we're doing that, I would like to encourage people to research, do it from, find the correct information, find the situation that works for them, and then take that information and go to somebody like me who might disagree and say, hey, I'm going to share with you something that you might not have thought about this way. Please, by all means, I would love nothing more, Terrence, than to find somebody like Tiffany to come onto this podcast who has a different opinion and have that discussion, not because I want to embarrass her or to say, that, oh, you're stupid, you're wrong, and ha ha ha, like you might see on Fox News or CNN, but so that I can actually learn something, because I could see something from a perspective that I clearly don't have. And I clearly, and so if there's somebody out there who doesn't share that opinion, if I can give them some insight, if I can give them some thought process, if I can give some body to that, by all means. That's why I love doing it. That's why I like to have these conversations. Obviously, it's a pleasure to work with the great TB. But what I think it comes down to more than anything is we need a revolution in this country when it comes to politics, discussing politics, and also the government. And it starts with the millennials. It starts with those conspicuous millennials. And it starts with us just standing up and saying, enough is enough. Let's change the status quo. Let's challenge it the way that millennials have always done. So yeah, I'm all about it. I'm always available. Just ask whenever.
There we go. Well, I'm going to ask you because look, I'm the grandpa of millennials, and like I said a little bit yesterday, like I was just not a good steward of the country myself by just not playing my own role, right? Like, sure, I voted in the presidential election since 2000 when I could vote, right? So like Bush twice, Obama twice, and Hillary this past time. But never did I do a mid-election, never did I pay attention to my state, right? And so the one good thing of all this coming out is now I pay attention to it. And yeah, you're right. We can't treat it like a taboo. This is something we should embrace because not only does it affect our lives, but these decisions affect all of our lives. So it's a definitely a new leaf I'm turning because I would say, even until recently, right? Like I tried to avoid political talk. I looked at it and Tiffany, damn millennials. I tried to avoid just politics in general because people get so crazy about it. But then the more that things happen, the more I'm like, you know what? Like I have for a long time been a part of the problem because I remained silent. I didn't research anything political wise because I just never cared, and I moved on. And so equally, I have had issues in that space. And so now I'm opening up, and of course I'm going to get some people that are going to be upset about it, but you know what? Tough. You got to adapt. You have to evolve. It's where we're at
today. If
they're
upset, bring it on. Help us learn. Help us see why we're wrong.
You just got to keep moving forward. So with that, thank you, everybody. We look forward to it. I know, Jeremy, you and I are going to be working hard. We won't say why, but we got a lot of things coming up. So we probably couldn't do anything until Wednesday or Thursday again. So, well, hey, no, Tiffany, we laugh at that because we know it's partially true, right? You know, some people are just like, damn, millennials under their breath. You know, hey, look, we know we get some flack. It's the way it is. You know it. You experience it. All right, everybody, take care.